Daniel wasn't supposed to be home that night. He had told me he'd be away until Sunday, and I had let myself believe I had more time. More time to figure out what I was doing, more time to pretend that what I was doing wasn't wrong. But time had run out. I heard the door open before I saw him. A quiet click followed by the sound of footsteps. My heart stopped. For a moment, I thought maybe it was a neighbor, maybe even just my imagination playing tricks on me. But then I turned, and there he was. Daniel stood in the doorway, his travel bag still slung over one shoulder, his face unreadable. His dark brown eyes flicked from me to Ethan, who was sitting beside me on the couch, his shirt crumpled on the floor. It wasn't hard to put the pieces together. The room smelled of sweat and perfume, of betrayal hanging thick in the air. Ethan jumped up immediately, scrambling to grab his clothes, stammering something I couldn't even process. But Daniel didn't look at him, he didn't even acknowledge his presence. His gaze was locked onto mine, and I wished more than anything that he would scream, that he would get angry, curse, throw something, anything, because that at least would have been easier than the silence. My voice came out small, broken. Daniel, He raised a hand, stopping me before I could say anything else. He let his bag slide off his shoulder, setting it down gently on the floor. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if he was controlling every breath, every motion with excruciating precision. Ethan was still frozen in the corner of the room, half-dressed and unsure whether he should run or stay. "I should go," he mumbled. Daniel still didn't look at him. Ethan hesitated for only a second longer before grabbing his shoes and slipping past Daniel out the door. The apartment felt impossibly quiet once we were alone. I took a breath, but it felt like my lungs had collapsed, like nothing I said would be enough to fix this. Daniel didn't move, just stood there staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite place. He should have been furious, he had every right to be, but instead his eyes just looked tired. "I came home early," he finally said, his voice calm in a way that made my stomach twist. "I wanted to surprise you." I swallowed hard. "Daniel, He let out a soft chuckle, but there was no humor in it. "It's funny," he mused. "I always thought that if this ever happened, I'd be angry. I thought I'd yell, throw things, ask why." He shook his head. "But I don't feel any of that." His voice was almost too steady, too composed, and it scared me more than if he had screamed. "I just feel tired." That was when it hit me, the weight of what I had done. Not in some grand, dramatic way, but in the way his shoulders slumped, the way his voice cracked just slightly at the end of his sentence. I had destroyed something we had built for years, and I had done it carelessly, selfishly. "I never wanted to hurt you," I whispered. He exhaled, running a hand over his face, and for the first time he looked away from me. "But you did." The silence between us was unbearable. I wanted to say something, to reach for him, to explain, though I didn't even know what excuse I could possibly give. But then, before I could, he turned and walked to the dresser. My stomach dropped as I watched him pull open the top drawer and take out a small velvet box. My breath caught in my throat. I had seen that box before. A few weeks ago, hidden in the back of his drawer when I was looking for a pair of socks. I hadn't opened it, but I had known. I had dreamed about the moment he would get down on one knee, about the way I would cry and say yes, and how perfect everything would be. Daniel flipped the box open, revealing the simple but beautiful diamond ring inside. His fingers trembled as he held it between us, his expression unreadable. "I was going to propose this weekend," he said quietly. "I spent months planning it." Tears blurred my vision. My throat tightened to the point of pain. "Daniel, please." He shut the box with a quiet snap, slipping it back into his pocket. He exhaled slowly, as if forcing himself to breathe. Then, finally, he looked at me one last time. "I hope he was worth it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Then he turned and walked out the door. He never came back, and that, more than anything, shattered me.